Food bank visits are at an all-time high in Canada, nearly 2 million visits last month. And this is not even the first thing that's going crazy in Canada this week. Marty up north, thanks for joining me one more time to talk about Canada and how just nuts it's been in the past in this past week since the last time we met. I've had a cold since then, so I'm going to try to refrain from coughing as much as I can through this. So if I have to mute myself, that'll be the reason why. But welcome.
Grab yourself a nice tea. That's what I got. Yeah, no, drinking tea, being sick. Interesting choice of an opening. I know that, interesting choice, but a weird coincidence. I actually asked a question on Twitter. I think it was 2 days ago. I made a quick poll and I asked people if they had been to food banks, because it's one of those subjects, right? You talk about food banks and I sort of had the sense that it didn't resonate, but it actually resonates. I was surprised at how many people told me on the poll that they had been to a food bank or were currently using a food bank or going to a food bank. And it's one of those things, actually. It's one of the it's one of those things, there are things that are happening in Canada where you often encounter groups that go, oh, that can't be right. If you live in a certain area, you're sheltered from some of that, right? A lot of people, like I hang out with I'll say it, I hang out within a part of Alberta that's pretty lucky, pretty prosperous, and so we're sheltered from some of those things. Mm-hmm. But when you try and span out across the country and do surveys broadly and stuff like that, you realize that there are actually real parts of this country that are really struggling, and food banks is one of those examples. I mean, I'm lucky. I've never used a food bank. But when I did that poll, I got a lot of stories from people telling me they were, using whether it's a food bank or something else, going to the church and getting a basket, or even worse, like people are not wanting to go to the food bank, and so they're cutting back on their groceries. They're not buying something. They're not, there's a food insecurity. It's sad and frightening, right? To think that in a country like ours, that we have a country like ours, we are like referred to as the breadbasket of the planet. Like, God, we produce food like wheat and milk and eggs and cattle, and we have people that are starving. That's frustrating. That's insane. And that's the state of the country.
And how many people are just house poor in this country? I mean, if you own a home, you're a millionaire, basically, across the country now because of the inflated prices of housing. And what do you do with that? What do you do with that once you've got your home? Then it's like, well, now we can't eat. And even if we could eat, well, maybe we won't be able to heat our home because of all these carbon taxes and the inflation. This is just insane.
It's the expression, right? That choosing between heating and eating, and we shouldn't have to make that choice. But people are making that choice. Which one do we want to talk about most? You want to talk about housing? You want to talk about the Actually, let's talk about housing real quick on that subject. Mm-hmm. It's pinned to the top of my tweets there. I did talk a little bit about this week about the Bank of Canada statistics, and bring up that one on that one right there. Roll it up. I don't know if the viewers can see it in detail, but I'll just explain it really quickly. When you borrow a large sum of money, like a mortgage in Canada, we have strict rules. And one of the things the banks do is they want to make sure that you can afford the mortgage. And roughly speaking, they want to make sure that no more than about a quarter of your salary is going towards your mortgage. So if you're borrowing a $400,000 house, it means that you need to have a $100,000 salary. Well, historically, the bottom line, people used to put about 20% of their income went towards their mortgage, and that was reasonable. But if you look at the graph real quick, the Bank of Canada, that's an alarming statistics. Almost 50% of the new first-time home buyers in this country right now are right at the limit there, and that's a huge jump in the last couple of years. People are borrowing, using 25% of their income towards their housing, and those are what I would call a high risk mortgage. And the fact that we're lending so much money like that, I think, is reckless, because unfortunately these are the people, as we just described, that are always one They're one small financial mishap away from big trouble. These are the people that have a mortgage that's right to the max, and if they get a flat tire, or the kid has I don't know, an unexpected expense, or the wife loses the job or something, any small financial hardship can put them over the edge in terms of being able to pay their mortgage. So, like, that's the state of the country right now. And you and I keep talking about this, and I keep trying to show this kind of stuff to people. Like, this isn't anecdotal. This is real. This is
and it's a real catch-22 for most people in Canada. They're homeowners. I mean, so if we want to bring the prices of homes down, which is what needs to happen, the prices of houses have to come down. And this is the thing. People's wealth is all tied up. Their mortgages, their how much money they owe is all tied up in the value of the properties currently at market value. Everybody's hoping that they'll go up so that they can get equity and earn money and all this stuff. Those days are over. It's completely over, that kind of speculation in the marketplace. What's going to end up happening is the housing prices are going to come down, and people are going to end up having to lose a bunch of money in like a reverse equity, essentially.
Yeah. So that becomes a case of, do we hurt more people who lose their houses? Is that offset by people who are helped by being able to buy the cheaper houses? It's a nasty equation. It's a nasty problem. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd prefer that we didn't have these ups and downs, and that everybody could just buy a house at a reasonable price, that there was enough houses available, that we didn't have to, give up an arm and a leg to buy a house. I mean, things have gotten ugly in this country, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a recurring theme, and I see that the Liberals right now are traveling the country, making all sorts of promises that they're going to build houses. And again, that in the back of my mind, that's not going to make things better. It's not up to the government to build the housing. It's up to the government to put the systems in place that, permitting and limit the regulations and stuff like that to ease that. But it's not the government's job in itself to build houses.
Well, they build ghettos. That's what governments do.
Yeah. Isn't Trudeau visiting your part of the world and making housing announcements? I know he was here. No, he sent his housing minister to Calgary this week and made a housing announcement.
I don't know if he's making housing announcements, but he's making announcements nonetheless. He is getting out there and saying a thing or two, and I guess we can get into some of that. Here's Trudeau here in British Columbia expressing his thoughts of the province.
You can see the future a little more clearly from BC than from just about any other part of the country.
It was a little quiet there, but he said you can see things a little bit more clearly in BC than you can from anywhere else in the country.
Do you guys have a crystal ball, or no? You know what? I'm gonna go with, I think maybe people are smoking a little too much. I don't know. Well, I know he smokes a lot of the funny stuff. I mean, that's
well, you'd have to think the way he does about economics.
We're going to come back to the other politicians that I think are smoking weird stuff right now. I mean, there's been a lot of comment on one politician in particular who's a little twitchy on the sideline. But let's stick with Trudeau. So what's he in British Columbia for this week?
Well, he's hobnobbing. He's in BC, and he's hobnobbing with. David Eby, the one of the few premiers of provinces in Canada right now that's happy to have the carbon tax on his constituents. So this is where they see eye to eye, and that's why they're seeing things clearly. Not clear enough. Here's what he said about his economic policy.
See, climate policy is economic policy.
Yep, it's terrible economic policy. That's what it is.
Holy smokes. I mean, if I'm going to interpret that, his climate policy is, I'm going to tax you to death. So does that mean that that's his economic policy? I'm going to tax you to death? Because I mean, I don't know what his climate policy is. I mean,
well, it is this one and the same. He's saying that's the whole thing. So the economic policy is climate policy is same.
It's typical Trudeau platitudes. I mean, it's the classic. We're going to grow the economy from the heart out, and the budgets will balance themselves, and so forth. I mean, hey, speaking of BC, did I see on the news that your former premier, what was his name, Horgan?
Horgan, yeah.
He just got appointed as ambassador to Germany.
He was on the coal board a minute ago. That's something
Yeah,
else.
no. Well, he quit. Didn't he quit politics because he was sick? I thought he was. Listen, maybe we'll talk more about
we
it
all
this
think
week.
he was sick,
I'm obviously
but
catching you off guard. But
another thing altogether.
Horgan was just announced as Canada's new ambassador to Germany. Yeah, I was surprised by that. I mean, well, now that you mention it, maybe there's a link. No, we would not. Germany wanted to. Here, let's replay this one. Germany came here, wanted to buy LNG. We told them no, there was no business case for LNG, so we send them packing. Now Joe Horgan, who was an MP, premier, John Horgan resigns. Because of his health, goes and joins the board of directors of a big coal mining company, and now is the ambassador to Germany. Oh well, now now it all makes sense. We're going to sell coal to Germany.
Yeah, so
that's Canada's policies. That's the environmental policy of Justin Trudeau in a nutshell. Like that's how silly we're
corruption.
Getting as
corruption. Yes. Well, you missed the first step of it because he was the premier of British Columbia, and he put his foot down saying no LNG shipping out internationally from British Columbia. We're not doing that. It's not happening on his watch. Turns out. People said, hey, are you profiting from all the coal that's still going through here that's being shipped out? No, I'm not doing that. Retires and then goes right to the coal board. When he was asked by a reporter, is this a conflict of interest, having this sequence of events? And he says, oh, no, it's not a conflict of interest. Canadians don't use coal for energy.
See, yeah. Okay, well, and that's why this is great, because you and I have a long-term memory. Unfortunately, most Canadians don't have a long-term memory. Mm-hmm. I mean, they'll come back, and Trudeau will mention something. Guilbeault will come and do something. I mean, it's like, yeah. Well, speaking of Guilbeault, that's another one. That's another parasite who just won't go away, right? I mean, he's. Like I said last week, that guy scares me. He scares me. I said it last week. He's got an ability to rally troops and still be effective, and he scares me. He's up to his old tricks in Ottawa this week still, right? I mean, while Trudeau's out gallivanting around and making a fool of himself, behind the scene, Guilbeault is still pushing some pretty nasty agenda items that should have Canadians scared.
Well, and this is what I was focusing on earlier today. This is Paul Mitchell on Twitter saying, a day after Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre announced a pressure campaign to pass Bill C-234 to remove carbon tax from fuels used in agricultural production. So this is directly an inflation tax on food, right? This makes food more expensive to produce. Stephen Guilbeault, the Liberal climate fraud minister, Stephen Guilbeault, admitted he's lobbying senators to kill the bill. And here's a little clip of him here.
I mean, we're against the creation of a new exemption. We were against Bill C-234 when it was in the House of Commons. We voted against it. So I have had conversations with, I don't know, maybe half a dozen, give or take, senators in the course of the last 2 weeks. I explained to them the reasons why we don't support the bill C-34. I mean,
so explain this, because this is, I mean, is there a law against it? Is it unethical? Like, what is it about lobbying, especially after they?
Well, first of all, let's talk about just this very, very briefly or quickly right now. This is a bill that was passed in the House of Commons. So, the Liberals don't like that, but for it to pass in the House of Commons means that some Liberals, it passed. Then it goes to 3 readings in the Senate. Guilbeault has said this kind of stuff many, many times, right? When the Supreme Court struck down Bill C-69, he's like, that's irrelevant. He doesn't respect procedures. He really never ever respects procedures, that guy. So then he says something else that's disturbing. I mean, the Senate is supposed to be the chamber of somber thought. So once a bill is passed in the House of Commons, it's supposed to go to the Senate for proper reflection, proper analysis. Like, they're supposed to read it and criticize it and make fine-tune amendments. For him to simply go and say, I want you to kill it, is it interference? technically not, but historically or in terms of common practice, yeah, it's
or in the spirit
bad.
of what the process
In a,
is.
Absolutely, absolutely, and yes, and that's the point. He doesn't respect the process. He's a radical. Like he's been arrested and he's been in jail. As far as I'm concerned, a guy with a criminal record shouldn't even be an MP. Somehow or other, you can have a criminal record and end up being an MP, and then he flaunts the law constantly when it's convenient for him. And when we say we're not going to respect the law, then he'll say we're going to, well, and then I'm going to throw the book at you. So, when a Scott Moe says I'm not going to collect the carbon tax because you're being unfair by exempting half the country, Guilbeault said, well, then I'll throw you in jail, kind of thing. So he's an evil politician. And and this.
Well, I thought it was especially
Yeah.
egregious that he's also a tax cheat. He
Oh yeah.
He evaded taxes for years. He had to pay back an exorbitant amount of the value we don't know, but we know that it's in excess of $10,000 that he had to pay back, which is huge. And this is somebody who wants to force taxes on people for environmental reasons.
Yeah. And apart from all of that, like, look at that bill, right? That bill is a bill trying to exempt farmers, people who produce food, from having to pay a carbon tax. Like, I mean, God, can't we all agree that there's a few things where carbon tax shouldn't apply on?
Or just taxes,
such as producing. Yeah. I mean, there's no food on, there's no tax, there's no GST on buying groceries. That's reasonable. Mm-hmm. And so should the carbon tax be taken up? I mean, there's a lot of taxes that farmers are exempt from. Here in Alberta, we have what's called purple diesel and regular diesel. Purple means it's been dyed, which means it's exempt from taxes, and so farmers can buy diesel that is exempt from some taxes.
All the way to children's clothing. Children's clothing is exempt from taxes.
Yeah. No, this is the liberal, the liberal policy, the liberal strategy for saving the environment is to tax everybody to death. There's no other strategy. They can't convince me that nobody's ever showed me what the liberal strategy is for fighting climate change. If you believe in climate change, which I don't believe in, right? It's a tax, man. The carbon tax is, I looked into it. The carbon tax is equivalent right now to a 1% increase in the GST. So Canada's GST is at 5%. They could have said that we're going to increase it to 6%, but rather than do that, they impose a carbon tax, which has exactly the same effect. It's a consumption tax. That's all it is. That's all it is.
Yeah, that's right. It is a consumption tax, and it's leading to prices going up for everybody. And do they care? Well, they don't, because Canadians are suffering.
And then everybody keeps arguing that it doesn't cause inflation, blah, blah, blah. But, I'm just reminded, last week when there's a backstory to everything, right? So 3 weeks ago, the government announces that they're going to provide some relief on the carbon tax to Atlantic Canada to promote getting heat pumps. Heat pumps are electric driven. Everybody's going rah, rah, rah. But then a bunch of people pointed out there's hardly any power in Newfoundland and Labrador as it is, because they had a fiasco of a project called Muskrat Falls. And guess what Newfoundland and Labrador Power did last week? They applied to their utility board of the province to increase the power rate by 6 cents a kilowatt. So it's like, folks, you're being played on all sides. God help you if you decide to turn off your oil-fired furnace at home in Nova Scotia and replace it with a heat pump to only incur a huge power bill or a huge spike in power consumption that will then be matched by an increase in the price you pay for power. It's like, welcome to the gong show that is Canada. Welcome to the gong show.
Yeah, well, Canada is a gong show. We just had Memorial Day or Remembrance Day here in Canada. Over the past weekend, many people had a holiday, a day off. I hope everybody went out and did something to at least have a moment of silence for our veterans. But not all our veterans are doing great at this moment. We have one who's a legend in Canada and should be considered a legend everywhere, and that's James Topp. He's in the news today because, well, he's being court-martialed, and he's being court-martialed for what it is that he did, which was speak out publicly in uniform against the COVID policies in the military. Now, these COVID policies in the military, by any stretch of the imagination, were not accepted, let's just say.
Well, they weren't accepted for one very good reason. The military's had really bad experience with forced vaccines and things like that historically. Like when we send, when we send our forces into Kuwait the first time in 1990, and when we sent them in Kosovo, and when we sent them to Afghanistan, yeah, one of the things we do is they line up, they roll up their sleeves, and they get a vaccine. And then over the last 20 years, we've given them so many vaccines that have had like really nasty repercussions, and they've in the case of COVID, they finally said enough is enough. Like we're not guinea pigs. You're not going to stab us. So that's part. Yeah, he protested that, but I thought he did it in a proper. Well, I guess. I mean, there's a military code of conduct. He spoke out, and that's it. I mean, the government, the military wants to make an example of him. He's no different than Tamara, and he's no different than others. He's being made an example of, and he's being court-martialed.
Yeah,
but it's not going well for the government. Again, they look like fools. I mean,
well, they look absolutely like fools, because here's the deal. When it came to the military, the lead guy, whoever the general or whatever it was, they came to him and said, "Can you make the vaccine mandates mandatory in the military?"
Yeah.
He said, "Nope, not gonna do it. That goes against their rights." And what did they do? They found some sexual scandal to pin on
dig
him.
up something on him and move him on. Absolutely.
Well, then the next guy that came up, they brought him in again. They brought in a new guy, and they said, "Okay, now make the mandates, bring it on." He said, "Nope." So they found a sexual scandal for him too. They brought another guy. Same thing. He said no. A sexual scandal came his way. So what do you think the fourth guy did? He went along with it.
No.
He went along with it. So finally they got a guy to go along with it. And this is how it came on. Now, James Topp, when he was brought in for court-martial, he's pled guilty. He's pled guilty to the charges.
To one charge, right? I think he has 4 against him. He pled guilty to 1.
Yeah. Well, he's admitting that he did it. I mean,
he's not. I spoke in public. You got me.
Yeah, and
of course.
And that's it. And he's facing dishonorable discharge for this, and which is just, it's egregious, because this isn't even a mandate that they have in place today.
No, and then like today or this week in court, I think his direct commanding officer wouldn't testify against him, so they went 1 or 2 levels above him. So they had some lieutenant colonel who was testifying against him, even though he probably never met him personally, doesn't know anything. And then the lawyer asked that guy a question. He's like, because the claim right now is that James Topp, by doing what he did, by speaking out in public and walking across the country in protest, brought disrespect to the regiment. And so the lawyer for James's lawyer said, "Let me get this straight. So one of your soldiers walks across the country, an amazing feat, an amazing achievement. He does it, and he collects the support of 40,000 people, and that brought disrespect to the regiment." And that guy literally looked at the camera and said, "Yes." I'm like, wow. Like, if I didn't know the background of James and why he was walking across the country, but you just told me that, hey, guess what that guy did? He walked across the country. I'd be like, holy shit, man, that's impressive. That guy walked across the country? Yeah, totally amazing. But somehow or other, walking across the country in this country brings disrespect to your organization. That's insane.
That's insane. I know the comments are going to be filled with people saying it's not walking, it's marching. I've had that before.
Yeah.
You don't mess with the military, guys.
It's no different than what they're doing. Like I said, it's no different than what they're doing to Tamara. It's no different than what they're doing to Constable Gruss in Ottawa, the lady who dared investigate. She just saw a pattern in Ottawa. She wondered why there was so many stillbirths in Ottawa, and she investigated it. Now she's being made an example. But I think James is going to win, and on that line, I think Tamara is going to win, and on that line, there was a victory this week. There was another victory here in Alberta. There was a restaurant called Pizza Without Papers. They changed their name. It was a pizzeria. I can't remember the original pizzeria, but when the mandates here in Alberta required that, you needed to show proof of vaccines to go out in restaurants, I think we had those pretty much across the province.
Mm-hmm.
This pizzeria refused to do that. He's like, I'm not again, similar to the upper echelons of the military that said they weren't going to break the law. That pizza guy said, that's against the law. I'm not going to ever ask somebody who's coming to my establishment to show me personal medical information.
Mm-hmm.
So he refused to do that. And Alberta Health Services kept going to his business and fining him. They fined him because they would go in the restaurant and say, show us your procedure for checking vaccine passports. They're like, I don't have one. So they gave him 18 citations. Anyways, the government dropped all charges against him today because they're unwinnable.
Mm-hmm.
And then he immediately turned around and he's suing the government of Alberta. Now,
Good.
as a taxpayer, good. As a taxpayer, I'm going to have to pay that because the government is going to lose. Maybe the government can do like we did for Omar Khadr. Maybe instead of fighting him, maybe we can give him $10.5 million. So for this pizzeria shop, Danielle, if you're listening, instead of fighting him when he goes after you, just compensate him. Give the guy the money for the business that he lost, for his pizzeria that he's lost, and his clientele and everything else, and make things right.
Mm-hmm.
Don't put him through another fight. So we're winning these fights. And James, if you're watching this somehow, or if somebody shares this with James, way to go, man. Like, keep up the fight.
Absolutely. But there are some fights that are just not winnable. And Trudeau's finding himself in the middle of that this week. You showed me the clip. I had to pull this one up because, oh boy. Well, we know that there's been protests all over Canada, and I mean, whatever side you want to take on this whole ordeal, Trudeau's picked his side, and he's living with the consequences of it.
Israel. Why are you supporting Israel? Don't push me. Hey, don't push me. I'm standing. Why are you supporting Israel? Hey, relax. I'm talking to the Prime Minister. Don't breach my rights. Why do you say Hamas is a terrorist organization? It's not a terrorist organization. No, they're Palestinian resistance. What about Ukrainian resistance? You're just bowing down to the Israelis. Why they can't fight back? They can't fight back. Shame on you, Trudeau.
I mean, it's laughable because he's just like, why is he shouting from a car at some guy that's
he's almost like standing on the running boards of his limousine yelling. He's in a pickle. The guy's in a pickle, right? I mean, he's correct right now. He's saying Hamas is a terrorist organization. Yeah, in Canada, Hamas has been listed as a terrorist organization for since 2006. So that's nothing new. But then this guy's mixing it up between saying that, by criticizing Hamas, you de facto support Israel. I guess that's possible. But then this week, poor Trudeau got hammered by Benjamin Netanyahu, because who's the prime minister of Israel. And he literally tweeted out directly to Trudeau saying, hey, stay out of this. And you don't know what you're talking about. Trudeau's lost credibility on all fronts. Like Trudeau,
because he called for a ceasefire.
He called for a ceasefire, and he called for
which is something that he actually he was heckled over in a restaurant in Vancouver just the other day. Asking,
was he heckled on another one?
Yeah. Okay. So here's the other clip. Here he is at a restaurant where he got basically chased out by an impromptu protest of the same caliber. So ceasefire he did call for, and then that's when Benjamin Netanyahu made his call. So he had to leave this restaurant, and you could see this other lady at another table just, I don't want anything to do with it. Get out of here.
Oh, yeah. Well, and then the other thing, I don't think maybe Netanyahu didn't call him out exactly on this one, but it was kind of implied. I mean, Trudeau uses language like human rights and civil rights and liberties and things like that. And again, when he talks that language, world leaders immediately go, dude, you call the Emergency Measures Act on your own people because they were parked in the streets and honking their trucks. Like, world leaders don't want to be lectured by. Trudeau has no moral high ground on any of these discussions anymore. Like, he doesn't. I mean, can you imagine if no, I don't even want to go there. Like, Trudeau doesn't have the moral high ground and he's being called out. That's it.
No, he doesn't have the moral high ground. And people are being told, like, you got to take this side or you got to take that side. I've been pretty clear. I'm on the side of Canada and I don't want to get involved in foreign entanglements. That's really my position. You can love it or hate it, however you like. But other people are getting in trouble at this point for having the same opinions. Candace Owens for the Daily Wired, she's in trouble for having the same opinion. While the owner of the business, Ben Shapiro, is very fervent on obviously his side.
I mean,
as well as Matt Walsh for the organization, both coming out and just saying we care about America and America is our number one priority. And foreign entanglements aren't really our cup of tea. So there's a lot of contention, and it's across the board. People don't have patience for other people's opinions in this whole thing, and that's largely where everybody's at.
And I mean, you and I are, I'm not taking a side on this one. I really don't want to take a side. But back to Trudeau. Trudeau has no opinion and no sides, but he takes every side, which at the end of the day catches up with him. Like, he's, I listen to, like, I speak French, right? I listen to him in French interviews. He did it again this week. Like, he did an interview where he's walking through the park and he's talking one-on-one with a guy in Quebec. And when I listen to him, I'm going like, Christ, you're a hypocrite. Or he just caters to whatever crowd is listening to him at the time. He just doesn't have a moral stance on anything, and then he's always lying, and then it catches up to him. I mean, what's the old expression? Like, if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything because you're telling the truth. But anyways, Trudeau, he's always telling lies, and whatever. It is what it is.
Yeah, it is catching up to him because these things are recorded, and when you're always just playing to the crowd, people are gonna catch up and go, "Hey, didn't you say that other thing over here?" And that's really where it's at.
I mean, he's in California as we speak. He landed in California about 3 hours ago, and you can almost tell, like, the governor of California is almost looking at his watch, going, "Oh shit, I got to meet with this guy," and he's giving him a quick few minutes and trying to be friendly about it. But you can tell even the governor of California is like, "Why am I meeting with this guy?" And as soon as he landed, Trudeau, like, the chit chat with it about Trudeau's socks, because Trudeau wore a pair of socks that the governor had given him 2 years ago with the Golden Gate on it. And then the governor literally looked at him and was like, "You're still, like, what? You want to talk about socks?" Like, people are beyond that. Like, that was cute. Talking about socks, 6-7 years ago was cute. Now there's real problems in the world, and we don't want to talk about socks. So let's talk about real stuff. And what did Trudeau lead off with? Climate change. I'm like, climate change. I can't wait for that volcano in Iceland to blow next week. Sorry. I mean, I'm not wishing any ill will on the people of Iceland. It's a terrible catastrophe, and I wouldn't want to be you, but I'm happy that there's a volcano somewhere that's just going to show to the whole world that when these things pop off, there ain't enough taxes in the world to prevent a volcano from popping off and changing the climate. And last time a big volcano let go in Iceland like that, it disrupted air travel for 6 weeks. So, I hate to bring this up, but it's another example. People need to, reality sucks and it hurts once in a while. And a bunch of people are going to get hurt, but by a big dose of reality when that volcano goes off. And there's another one in Mexico getting ready to pop also next week. So, how did we get on the topic of volcanoes?
I don't know. I was unaware of this. I was absolutely unaware of this, but I do know.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But I do follow, like, this climate stuff, especially because I do consider myself an environmentalist, a real environmentalist, not a climate alarmist, someone who thinks that the sky's falling. And in fact, I don't see CO2 as a pollutant, and I think that this is something that came up last week, and I actually have a clip now that we're bringing this up, talking about the fact that CO2 is not actually, in fact, a pollutant, and I'll play this clip here.
A lot of This environmental question depends on, I think, a very flawed fundamental presupposition. It depends on the idea that carbon dioxide is pollution. And I would argue, after interviewing hundreds of scientists, including many who've worked for the UN IPCC, many of the leading scientists in the world, that the notion that CO2 is pollution is absolutely preposterous. We exhale about 2 pounds of it every single day. The proportion of greenhouse gases made up of human CO2 emissions is a fraction of 1%. The idea that that is going to destroy the planet or change the temperature of the earth is, frankly, in my opinion, totally ludicrous. Yep. But from a totalitarian perspective, if you can convince people that CO2 is pollution, there's no human activity that doesn't result in CO2 emissions, including living, including dying, turning on a light switch. Every single aspect of your life, then, if we submit to the idea that CO2 is pollution, then comes under the regulatory control of the people who claim to be saving us from pollution. So when they do these environmental studies and they say, well, your CO2 footprint will be smaller if you eat bugs or you do this, that, or the other, you drive an electric car, that doesn't show anything about whether that's going to benefit the environment or not. In fact, CO2 has actually been very beneficial for the environment. In interviewing Trump's climate advisor, Dr. William Happer, a physics professor at Princeton University, he said the Earth is starving for more CO2. And since we've had a little bit of an increase in atmospheric CO2 over the last 100 years or so, plants have gotten much greener, agricultural yields have improved. So I think we need to also talk about the fundamental presupposition here. Is CO2 really pollution? If it's not, then all these alleged environmental benefits are completely fictional.
What a great statement there. And I mean, it's just, it's great to reflect on, to see that there are sober minds out there actually like thinking.
It's another narrative that's collapsing, right? The climate change narrative is collapsing. I mean, it's been too long now of 10 years, 20 years, 30 years of predictions that are just not coming true. I mean, did you see this week Greta Thunberg was at an event in Europe somewhere, and then somebody came on stage, somebody who was there for the event, somebody on her side came on stage and said, "Hey, I came here to talk about climate, not politics," and he grabbed the microphone from her. So the narrative is collapsing everywhere on that one. But I will say this.
Speaking of Greta, before you get into that, this is just an image that I had, and this is Greta Thunberg reportedly deletes 2018 tweet claiming that the climate change would wipe out all of humanity by 2023.
Totally.
So
No, they've been wrong on prediction after prediction after prediction, and so the narrative is collapsing. But what I was going to say is, I follow my analytics closely on Twitter and on YouTube, as you do too. And I've noticed that whenever I talk about climate, it's still one of the ones that gets me throttled the most. I still get shadow banned for talking about climate. I'm safer talking about COVID. I used to be nervous about talking about COVID because that would get you suspended quickly. But climate change is still a big taboo. Even your videos, Clyde, I know you've noticed this, right? Like when you talk about climate or something else, they immediately show up with some sort of context on the bottom. I hate when YouTube and Facebook and all those things do that. I don't need your additional context. If I want to talk about climate, it's because I want to talk about climate, and I don't need somebody warning me about it.
Well, I mean, in the reality or the grand scheme of things, people are looking at these contexts, and now they're seeing the context as what's the current BS du jour, right? Anything that you're not allowed to say, or there's a warning about you saying.
So I'm surprised Trudeau is still going out on the climate. He's still betting on climate a little bit. I don't know what else he's going to use as a wedge issue. He can't. I don't want to give him ideas. I mean,
Well, I think this is the moment right now, of course, where it's all collapsing. So the COVID narrative collapsed. The climate narrative is collapsing. I mean, people are coming to. They're coming to their senses. I mean, you can no longer go around and call people science deniers. I heard this recently, saying that somebody's questioning the science. Like, what's wrong with questioning science? This is what science is questioning reality. This is the whole point.
Well, there's an individual on Twitter that annoys me because he's created a term called climate denial. I'm like, climate denial? That's not even a concept that makes sense, dude. Like, nobody's denying climate. Like, if you said climate change, if you said man-made climate change denial, I'd go, okay, yeah, that's a possibility. But to just shrink it to climate denial, you can't deny climate. Like, it's an insane proposition.
Well, they want to take the anthropomorphic out of climate change, right? They want to say that you're, portray this idea that you're denying the reality that the climate's always changed.
Well, and it's also it's old tricks used by the church used to. I mean, the climate alarmists talk the same way that the church used to, right? You're a denier. The church used to call people who didn't believe in whatever Christ or whatever deity that you were a denier. You were a lay person. I've been called lay. I've been called a lay person. People have literally said to me, well, you're a lay person. You don't understand climate. Leave it up to us. I'm like, dude, I have a Bachelor of Science. Like, Christ, what the hell else do I need? I'm as far away, but that's beside the point. The moment you call me a lay person, you're using techniques and ploys to you're preaching from a position of authority, which doesn't work for me. I don't buy that position. Like, I hate people who say, well, you're not a scientist or an epidemiologist. You're not an epidemiologist. How can you talk about COVID? I'm not a freaking vet, but I can still identify that that's a dog who's licking his balls. Like, come on, and I'm not a meteorologist and I can tell it's raining outside. So enough with this bullshit, as if the 4 years that you go to university are it and nothing else. Like,
it's called sophistry. Yeah. It's the idea of using bad arguments and bad faith arguments. and there's an art to it. There's actually an art to it. And it's the reason why fallacies were all created around debate. The whole concept of a fallacy is like, okay, if somebody who does the appeal to authority, then you can throw that away. It's just a fallacy. We know this, and there's a bunch of them that are commonly used.
It's making me think of something, and we need. When we started the conversation today, I was going to try and maybe catch your viewers off guard and be really positive and pro everything, because I saw some stories like that this week, like, oh, the new vaccines are out. Oh, isn't that wonderful? Like, the people on the news are like, oh, that's so great. The new vaccines are out. So I thought, yeah, let's do a show like that. Throw Clyde really off guard, whatever you bring up. Oh, really? Trudeau went to Vancouver this week? Oh, that's so amazing.
That's fantastic.
What did he talk about? Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, wow. That's so brilliant. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, Vancouver is more visionary. My God, I can't do it. Let's finish on a quick, funny note. Play the tweet. Did you cue it up? Can you play the free? You talked about Freeland enough. I mean, maybe we don't need to talk about it.
Do you have a particular clip you wanted put up?
The one where she was twitching this week, like the one yesterday where she was just out of control twitching, like that one. Oh my God.
So I did a video. For everyone watching this now, it would be yesterday. Pretty popular video. I wasn't expecting it. I was criticizing like this, like, what is wrong with her? Took off. Video went platinum, I guess you could call it. Did really well, but the question is really, what is wrong with this lady? She's so twitchy. She can't keep still. Is it a disciplinary thing? Like, was she just like a bad parents, or is she on something?
Yeah, like I've had people say perhaps it's Parkinson. I don't think so. My father had Parkinson's, and I know I'm going to have Parkinson's later on in life because I have. I'm going to put up my hand here, but I've had people comment, like, if I'm eating a food like a burger, you'll see a little shaking in my hand. I don't like eating with my hands for that purpose. I'm self-conscious. Like, if I'm holding a slice of pizza, I shake. That's not Parkinson, man. To me, that's somebody who's high on meth or something. It's whatever.
Well, like, what's going on
that's our deputy prime minister, folks. That's our second in command in this country, standing there just twitching away, waiting for her turn at the mic.
Yeah, I mean, what it looks like Lord to me is someone who's like trying to reassure everybody around her that she's paying attention. Like, I'm totally paying. I got this. I'm listening. What's that over there? Squirrel?
Yeah, and I mean, I shake my head too. People will say that about me. I'm sure there'll be some comments like, Marty, you're just as bad as Freeland. All right, maybe I am.
No, but she just appears like she cannot pay. She can't. she can't focus her attention on anything in particular, and it's really ridiculous.
I mean, that's a classic sign of somebody who you've met people like that, right? You ask them a question, and you can tell they're not even listening to your question. They're already formulating an answer, and it's not even an answer to your question. They just want to say something. So she looks like, to me, like she's just rehearsing a speech in her head, getting ready for it. That's my observation. But
well, there was the comparison to the old funny mustache man and an old footage of him when he was tweaking out at the Olympic Games back then. And this is her, obviously, during the this was during the press conferences when they were making the decision to declare a state of emergency in Canada and invoke the Emergencies Act. And she's mind you, with this close-up, you don't see that everybody else around her is calm and not looking around the room and not twitching and breathing heavy and doing all this weird stuff. So,
I would have been nervous being around Hitler. I'm glad he's not alive. I don't know how I'd deal knowing that man was alive today. I'd have a hard time. Well, cool. Interesting week in Canadian politics. We didn't even talk about crack pipes in Ontario and Trudeau's T-shirt, and what else could we have talked about? There's another week.
Way too much going on. Marty, where can everybody find you?
Marty Up North on Twitter and Marty Up North on YouTube.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining me and talking about Canadian politics.
Yeah, take something for that cold of yours or your cough. Go grab a beer. Go grab a beer. You need a beer.
Right.
IPAs are good. I was always told IPAs are good for colds. Drink an IPA. Cheers, Clyde.
Cheers.